This is another kind of you have to see it to believe it sort of thing.
The story that you are about to see could happen.
What's going on with my dad?
More people should become Hoboes and learn to be nice and warm to each other. You don't.
It's the Lost Picture Show box set from your favorite guys and gals at Vinegar Syndrome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Celeste La Cabra. Welcome back to the channel. Now, this video has been in the works for literal months. I've been working on this, so I do hope that it was worth the wait. Before we get started, if you are at all interested in in-depth discussions on cult and art house films, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, comment lovely things for me to read, share it with a pal, etc. That would all help me. And if you think that the work that I do is valuable, there's also a link in the description for my Patreon page, whereby you will be granted access to at least 3 patron-only videos per month, handcrafted personalized postcards, and more. So if you are unfamiliar, Vinegar Syndrome is essentially a Blu-ray distribution company and film archive specializing in forgotten genre films. Sexploitation, hardcore films, slashers, splatter films, that kind of thing, martial arts films. They restore to the best of their ability and put out in pristine, premium packaging for home use and distribution. I think I've described them before as like a sleazy Library of Congress that also sells Blu-rays, and I think that that is accurate. I guess let me not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get started with this absolute behemoth. I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of work and ambition that went into creating this set, but let me tell you, the amount of work that goes into reviewing it was quite a bit as well. I watched every film on this, I watched every supplement and every commentary, and I read both of the booklets cover to cover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to review all 10 of these films, both concisely but also intelligently. Like, I'm going to try to say something somewhat in-depth about each one of them without doing any spoilers. I'm going to make a case for why I think that this box set is worth having, even though it is like a huge blind buy, and then we're going to go through all the supplements and discuss those, and I'm going to attempt to rank these films at the end just for fun. So first though, let's go ahead and unbox this. Really cool package here. It has a magnet clasp here, and it opens up, and then it further opens here. So you have all this artwork. There's this. You got like original theatrical posters and some like writing and everything. You get the 2 film canisters here, and then it houses the slipcover and the discs and everything, and the booklets. But it also, I like how you have this marquee here too. It's difficult to do this without feeling like I'm gonna break it. This also folds out for the excellent artwork that was commissioned for this. There's your full art. And they are selling prints of this on their shop, and I do think it's gorgeous and really cool. I think it's neat how they had to essentially like invent new packaging for this release, as they are wont to do. Just unpacking everything right now. This does fit on a shelf, by the way. It's a little bit chunky for sure, right? But in terms of height and width, this actually does fit on your shelf as just like a chunky release or box set or what have you, right? So, okay, so we have our first disc thing, case, whatever, with the more artwork on it. I like this a lot. The images make more sense once you've seen it, but as I kind of said in my initial unboxing, there's nothing to differentiate this on the front and the back. There's no like print on the side that can tell me which is supposed to be the front or the back, so I kind of just have to guess. And there's your marquee with the films that are included in this first case, your titles and special features and such. And it's a 3-disc set, so there is that. There's also the booklet with the exact same shot of this young woman's titties here. I think I can get away with flipping through this, but you have lots of writing and essays, and Haunt Love is the designer on these books as always, and he does an excellent job as always. And you have the other one. Yeah, there's that one. There's this. Again, I'm just taking a guess as to what the front and the back is. There's your marquee again. There's your back and your features. And once again, 3 discs. I did have a slight complaint in that it's not immediately clear on the disc art which film is on which disc. That's a very minor complaint because I could just not be a lazy piece of shit and look at the back where it just tells me, you know. And then we have the second booklet with more breasts. Actually, she technically has pasties on, so I don't know if I can get away with this, but YouTube police. These are not female presenting nipples, completely uncensored. She does indeed have pasties on. Yeah. It's unfortunate when you know what this is, but that design is fucking sick. And I would put this on a shirt, but I'm hesitant to do it knowing what the character is. And then let's see if I can get away with this again. Get your booklet. Lots of great juicy writing in here. Don't listen to me. All right, let's attempt to go through all these films. So if you're unaware of what this set actually is, or what the conceit of it is, or what it all entails, essentially this is a box set comprised of 10 lost films. And if you're unfamiliar with what a lost film is, basically they are films that are no longer able to view because they didn't get either digital or physical home media distributions, because then not enough prints were made for theatrical distribution, and the original film materials are either destroyed or lost. There are different kinds of lost films. Like there are some that presumably a negative or some kind of print exists, we just haven't found it yet. And then there are those that we have reasonable certainty that they are truly lost. Like the owner of the negative destroyed it himself, or it was destroyed in like a fire on accident or something, and the opportunity to make copies was not there yet. So these are films that were previously lost in, some cases since like the 60s and the 70s. So they've been lost for a long time. And because Vinegar Syndrome essentially purchases so many film elements and rescues so many film elements through their time doing that, they have found a considerable number of lost films, and this is their collection of 10 of those. It's kind of like because Vinegar Syndrome, what it means is it is the actual chemical process of degradation for celluloid film. Begins to become vinegared, and the closer you get to that, the less usable it becomes. The image deteriorates and the film stock itself deteriorates, and you're not able to get a good digital transfer or a good theatrical distribution, or a good theatrical screening out of it. So this is kind of like the culmination of their mission statement of rescuing film elements and creating high quality presentations of previously lost or underappreciated films. And I think that this box set is truly like a success in every sense of the word. It is maybe my candidate or my pick for the best release of 2023, full stop, period. Yeah, I think that's enough context to lay down the groundwork for it. And let's discuss the films themselves. So we start off with Barbara from 1970. This is maybe my favorite film off of the set, which is maybe unfortunate that we started off on such a high note, but it is seriously just fucking insane. This is a softcore sexploitation film. Basically what that means is that there's a lot of sex that happens in this film, and it is borderline pornographic, but you're not going to actually see any like penetration or what are called hardcore scenes, which is generally just penetration, right? Essentially, I don't know, this is about a group of people, one of whom is named Barbara, presumably, right? Who sort of use their time on Fire Island to explore their sexuality, and they're kind of led by this almost like cult leader figure in seeing how far they can take their sexual liberation and freedom. It results in a lot of interesting things, and a lot of things that I think we would consider to be cool and good and based, like group sex and homosexuality and that sort of thing. But there's also a lot of depictions of basically just like sexual assault that are, it kind of opens with like a very long extended sex sequence, and a man kind of appears, and while they're sleeping, he essentially rapes them, but they're into it, so I guess it's fine. It's questionable for sure, but it's all part of this like really kind of anarchic look at sex, and it kind of advocates for this sort of sexual anarchy that I think goes into territory that is problematic, but it makes for a really fascinating and transgressive and difficult film. And it is really something to me that they decided to open with this one, because it is maybe the hardest one to get through in terms of the content. So that feels like a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing they did on purpose. Like, oh, you spent $70 on films that nobody has seen? You really took that chance with us? Yeah, well, we start with this shit, you know? Heather Drain writes in her essay about the film that she hates the music, but I really don't agree. I think the music is so good, and I am really kind of sad that this didn't come with a CD soundtrack. Hopefully they can do a vinyl press of it at some point, because it's just this really weird kind of like 60s Simon and Garfunkel-y kind of weird freak folk stuff that like is very silly but is very catchy. I especially the Ordinary Woman song is really good and gets stuck in my head sometimes, but I especially love the Candy Bar song. It's really goofy and I just really like it. I will say there is a scene of bestiality in this film, so I'm just kind of stacking trigger warnings here for you that if you're sensitive to these kinds of things, you might want to skip it. Now, nobody actually sexually assaults an animal on screen, but two men do have sex with a dog, and the way that it is portrayed is a little too close to that actually happening for my comfort. It is a lot. Yeah, this film is pretty largely indefensible in a lot of places, but I've never seen anything like it, and it takes it so far that I have to kind of admire parts of it, or admire the audacity of it. To be clear, I'm not advocating for most of what happens in this film, but I do think that it is purposefully pushing boundaries and making the viewer uncomfortable. I think that the first sequence in this film where you're just basically watching a couple have sex on the beach, which, by the way, for me personally, is maybe the single most uncomfortable place I can think of having sex with somebody, is on the sand. You know, Anakin was right when he talked about how much he hates sand. I will never... People like to shit on that quote. I think it's the truest thing that's ever been said in a film.
I don't like sand.
But throughout the entire scene that we're watching, it's unclear to me if this is a real recording of an actual like congressional hearing, or if this was just like staged, but you basically hear people arguing about the necessity for free speech as it relates to sexual content, as it relates to pornographic content. There's a very like purposeful intellectual debate happening while this is all playing out. Oh, I guess I should be giving ratings as I go along here. I gave Barbara a 7 out of 10. And so I think that it is intelligent. I think that it is making a statement, even if I think that it takes some of these ideas too far. Looking at the runtime, I need to be quicker on this stuff. So let's move on to the Las Vegas Strangler from 1968. I don't think I'll be talking about these films as much as that one, because that one I thought was the most interesting, or at least had the most to talk about. Las Vegas Strangler is kind of it's a proto-slasher, and it is kind of, like, we're talking about late 60s, so we're not talking about the slasher boom yet, but like Psycho and Peeping Tom are out, so you're seeing the seeds of this kind of thing starting to happen. And it definitely, I think you could call this a slasher pretty comfortably, and like the purists would get mad at you, but I think it would fit in like a film marathon of slashers or whatever. Like if you're gonna put Psycho in there, I think you could get away with putting this in there too. But essentially this is a pretty low-key black and white film set in Las Vegas, obviously, about a guy who is just kind of killing women, right? It's not much more than that, but it does have some interesting... I swear, Psycho, like, really, for better or worse, has influenced the horror genre to such an extent that, I don't know, you can see it's like its footprint all over so many different films, and this one is no exception in that, you know, it's not really the same way that they do it in Psycho, but the killer, when they are revealed, has some weird, like, psychological issues going on that are then haphazardly explained. I gave Las Vegas Strangler a 6 out of 10. Like, it's fine. It's perfectly serviceable for what it is while it's on, but it's nothing, like, incredible, right? Next is the sex serum of Dr. Blake, also known as Voodoo Heartbeat.
Voodoo Heartbeat.
That first title is what it was called in its uncut version, and the more truncated, like R-rated or even PG-rated, I think there was a PG cut out there, was called Voodoo Heartbeat. This is, as you can probably tell, a sexploitation film about a scientist who creates a serum to increase sexual libido.
From the forbidding darkness of man's forgotten past it came, a creation of unbelievable power, an elixir of evil, brewed in the secret bloody rites of a voodoo altar, to curse all those it touched with a lusting madness, an erotic nightmare of sinful vision and murderous craving.
The print is a little bit rough. Oh, I will say the prints on the first two look great. Like, they do look really good. They look really healthy. They have a really beautiful image to them. You know, one last thing about Barbara, I do think that it just looks beautiful. Like, I love the cinematography on it. I love the aesthetic of it. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking about Barbara, but like, Sex Serum is a little bit rougher. This is clearly like I mean, we gotta take what we can get here for Lost Films, right? But like, we're talking about a release print that has burned in subtitle tracks, and there's actually 2 of them. I believe it's a Belgian print, so there's like Belgian and French language subtitles. I might be misremembering that, but you got 2 burned in subtitle tracks, and then if you're like me, you have the English subtitle track on top of that, and it's almost impossible to read. What I had to literally do was go to my actual like Blu-ray settings and move the subtitle track above, so it was covering a lot of the image, but like, I could actually read it. It's not ideal, but it is what it is, you know, you take what you can get. This is another film that I kind of thought was just fine. Like, for this kind of thing, it's decent. And there is a pretty interesting, another through line here. There's an interesting threesome on the beach sequence going on here. The sex looks a little bit more hardcore than I was expecting. Like, I think we're pushing it. And there's certainly a lot of full frontal male nudity too, which is always appreciated. And, you know, with a film called Voodoo Heartbeat, you are going to have a little bit of questionable racial politics going on here, or like making, I don't know, kind of exoticizing. Is that a word? I don't know. There's some weird racial stuff in here for a little bit, but it's mainly just kind of like a silly sexploitation film. That one gets a 6 out of 10 from me as well. Next is a film called What's Love from 1987. This one I thought was pretty fascinating. It's kind of... It's a film about the devil.
I might look like this.
And he is sort of... Okay, so I watched these all like back to back to back, and it was a while ago at this point because this whole project has taken me so long, but like... And so specific plot details are perhaps a little bit hazy at this point, but I think essentially what is going on here is like the devil is... Hold on, let me look it up real quick. Okay, I don't fucking remember what the plot of this movie is, and apparently the internet doesn't either, but essentially like the devil comes to Earth and sort of messes with various people, and it's just kind of loosely connected vignettes of blasphemy and softcore and that sort of thing, right?
I have any idea how well trained and disciplined I am.
I like that.
The 2 halves of this film are like kind of directed by different people and like really far apart from each other, so that kind of adds to the disjointedness of it, but there are just sequences in here that really stayed with me, and I like how abstract and like ridiculous and nonsensical and surreal the whole thing is. I don't know, you have some really interesting sequences where the director is like being crucified like Jesus, and there's priests that get really horny, and there's like a motorcycle cop who gets seduced, and it's just there's all sorts of wacky shit happening in this. I gave it a 6 out of 10 the first time I watched it, but after watching it with the commentary and after it had stayed with me for a bit, and I found myself thinking about it a lot, I bumped it up to a 7. I don't know. This is one you kind of have to see to get a read on. It's not one I can really describe to you super efficiently. I think it's one that you just kind of have to see, you know? Okay, next is The Last of the American Hoboes. This purports to be a documentary, but it very obviously isn't. Like, these are all clearly staged sequences of these quote-unquote hobos that are very obviously actors doing nothing, really? I don't know. There's not a lot that happens in this. It's just kind of like vaguely following around people
More people should become hobos and learn to be nice and warm to each other.
doing stuff. I don't know, like it purports to be like a kind of sociological document or like an important treatise on like the value of these people's lives
Merry Christmas, bum.
and like giving you a peek behind the curtain to like lifestyles you're not accustomed to or something. It fancies itself an anthropological sort of project of sorts, but it's just it doesn't really work for me because it's so obviously staged, and if you're gonna stage stuff you might as well stage stuff that's interesting, you know. And I just don't really feel like that happens here, so I don't know. I gave this one a 5 out of 10. It's fine. The music is really obnoxious and it kind of plays a lot and it repeats a lot of the songs. I don't know, I didn't get a lot out of this one. Next is Red Midnight. This one isn't necessarily as good as it is just batshit insane and fascinating. This is kind of a exploitation scare film directed by like an optometrist, I think. He was just like a guy that had a lot of concerns about various conspiracy theories and decided to make a film about it. It's not clear how much of this was intended to just be schlocky exploitation, how much of this is like an earnest attempt to make a real film that actually has important messaging. There is like gratuitous nudity throughout that definitely doesn't feel like it's there for artistic purposes and feels like it's there to sell the film, you know? It has maybe the most bizarre conspiracy theory I've heard in a while. It's like a nuclear holocaust scare film. But the specific thing that the director is clearly afraid of is that too many of our structures and buildings are made out of wood. And if somebody wanted to, they could strategically set a few places on fire and then the whole country would go up in flames and just collapse. It's very strange. It's another one of these like you have to kind of see it to believe it type of things. There's like a scientist and his wife that get captured, and I'm trying to think how much I should say without spoiling, but like things happen to them and to her in particular that just boggle the mind, and like the reactions that the characters give are not in line with what human beings would do, and it's just really kind of fascinating. I gave this one a 6 out of 10 as well. I enjoyed it. I don't know that I've seen anything like it, and it is so specifically like the wackadoodle fucking thoughts of one bizarre mind, like Crazy Millionaire Money, to just kind of like put your strangest and most nonsensical thoughts onto film while also getting an excuse to like see some nudity and like film some gore, and like it's just so bizarre. So there's that. Next, this is the one that was really being used to sell the package that I think people were the most excited about when everything was announced and people were getting their packages in. This is the Rare Blue Apes of Cannibal Isle from 1974, and this is another kind of you have to see it to believe it sort of thing. It is so fucking wild and out there, like... It's a musical. We will always see life through. It is a kid's film. It reminded me a lot of... I'm going to throw out some points of reference that you may or may not know what the fuck I'm talking about. It kind of reminded me of like The Adventures of Milo and Otis, complete with questionable animal treatment. mixed with We Sing in Sillyville. I'm sure I just awakened something for at least a few of you, some kind of locked, repressed memory, but it feels like that kind of thing that you watch as a kid and looking back on, you're not sure if it was something that you dreamed or if it was something that really happened. A lot of Teletubbies vibes going on in here too, I think. This is kind of a co-production between the United States and the Philippines, and it certainly looks like a Philippine film. Like it has that aesthetic and that look to it. Should I even attempt a plot synopsis on this? Like, it's about this kid who has a pet duck, I think. Or is he a goose? I don't know. He's named Mr. Quack Quack. I'm pretty sure it's a duck. And his dad says he can't keep the duck, so he runs away and ends up on Cannibal Isle, where these dudes in crocodile outfits eat blue apes, and they're both just like big, kind of almost like Chuck E. Cheese-esque like costumes or whatever. And so the blue ape and the kid escape and are being chased, and there's musical numbers, some of which are real fucking bangers, and the Crocks have like Cockney accents, and I don't even know what to say. This is the kind of thing that has a lot of rewatch value, but it also, the charm of it does kind of wear off throughout the runtime. I think I did land on a 6 out of 10 for this one as well, but it's certainly a fun one to throw on with friends and just kind of marvel and watch mouth agape, I suppose. I will say the duck is treated not great. Like, there's not any like overt, like horrible cruelty, which I was kind of led to believe going into it. But they clearly didn't have the duck's best interest in mind, and he gets put through the ringer for sure. The print on Rare Blue Apes is fucking rough. Like, it's clearly a few generations past the camera negative, and it looks rough. It looks pretty beat up, and there's a kind of pulsing effect to the colors that are pretty difficult to get through and pretty challenging on the eyes, I would say. Okay, next is Violated from 1973. This is another candidate for my favorite film in the set, and it's again one that is not particularly defensible, I have to be so honest. It's a pretty rough, well, roughy and rape and revenge type film. It's about a guy, I'm gonna sound like a bad person saying I liked this, but it's about a guy who goes around breaking into women's houses or capturing them off of the street in various weird, freaky masks, rapes them, murders them, and then carves a swastika into their chest. It's just so extreme and so in bad taste and so like out there that, I don't know, it also just has like a really nasty, seedy, grimy aesthetic to it that I was into. And, you know, with rape and revenge films, there's always the revenge part, and this is not necessarily like I don't think any of his victims really make it, but like there is a character that takes it upon herself with some friends to take matters into their own hands, and the stuff that they do is just as fucking insane and just as wild, and like, I don't know, this wasn't boring, I'll say that. And you know, this is not one that I would recommend without a lot of caveats, but if you're a sick freak and you're into some of these more like sleazy films, I think you'll get something out of this. It was directed by one of the producers of Orson Welles' Touch of Evil and Jack Arnold's The Incredible Shrinking Man. So it's really insane to me that a man of this prestige went on to just hop headfirst into the fucking gutter and make this shit. Oh, I'll say this. There is a ton of gratuitous nudity in this, and I think it is kind of funny, if not perhaps a little bit misguided, that the disc menu, like, clip sequence is just the woman getting undressed and getting into the shower, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. But it shares a disc with the Rare Blue Apes of Cannibal Isle, so the one film that you could ostensibly show to your kids or to kids in general, you have to kind of strategically, quickly enough get past the disc menu so they don't see that part. I don't know, that's kind of funny to me, or that's kind of like, that felt like it was on purpose or something, but worth noting, I suppose. Next, from 1968. How do I say this? I'm not sure how to categorize this film. It's called Beware the Black Widow. It's kind of a slashery type of thing. Again, another kind of proto-slasher where this person in like a black veil called the Black Widow is like killing people in a sort of like brothel situation. They're kind of tied up with like the mob.
More tricks a night, they make more dough. Point, baby. I got business to do.
And some like shady characters, and they start dying. You know, it's another one of those that I don't have a ton to say about without spoiling anything. I will say it's pretty straightforward. It has like some beautiful like black and white cinematography. It is a time capsule of sorts.
Who's a majigger?
Don't call me no who's the majigger, you foreign string bean.
And I do like the look of the killer quite a bit. I just generally think it's a pretty decent, if not especially special film to watch, but it's enjoyable enough and I do recommend it. I'd give that one a 6 out of 10 as well. And then the last film on here from director Joe Sarno is Deep Inside from 1968. As you can imagine, this is another sexploitation venture.
Have you ever had an affair with a girl? No.
But it's primarily like a melodrama.
What an enthusiastic group.
Like this girl gets a lot of her old friends and acquaintances together on this island, on this in this house on Fire Island yet again. I think it's interesting that we open and close with a film set on Fire Island, and she just kind of like is a little puppet master, like matching them up and this, that, and the other. And so people are just kind of having sex and or arguing, and the sex is not particularly like fun to watch. I don't know, it's kind of repetitive, and there's some interesting sequences and some attractive people, but it just sort of meanders quite a bit. It's kind of long. Like I think it's closer to like an hour 50 as opposed to like an hour 20, which is what something like this probably should be. I don't know. I found it really hard to pay attention to this one and to like stick through it. But I will say the black and white cinematography is beautiful. Like I will give it that. And the poster for it is so great too. I don't know. It was like fine. It just wasn't really for me. I think I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 10, which is maybe a little bit harsh in retrospect. Maybe in retrospect, I would say that this is closer to a 5 and Hoboes is closer to a 4. So yeah, those are the films. If I'm gonna rank them, let's try to do that from worst to best. I think in retrospect, I was a little bit harsh on Deep Inside. Let's go last of the American Hoboes, then Deep Inside, then Las Vegas Strangler, then Serum of Dr. Blake, then Beware the Black Widow, then Red Midnight, then Cannibal Isle, then What's Love, then Violated, then Barbara. I think I'm gonna go with that. That's my ranking. Definitive, set in stone. Can't change the official word on the subject, I think. No. That'll probably change if I end up rewatching any of these, but that's my sort of tentative ranking. Okay. Let's try to go through these special features, shall we?
I like that.
So the first and primary and most important feature on here is the Against the Grain documentary, directed by Elijah Trenner from 2023, I think. It's just so good. It is actually where I recommend you start with this set, is you watch this first and you'll get a lot of context and a lot of appreciation for what you're about to see and why it's important. It's mostly about Vinegar Syndrome because they produced it and it's for their like flagship box set, but like it also includes a lot of input and a lot of time and attention paid to other labels like Severin and Distripix and Kino and Milestone. There's a lot of love for just like boutique Blu-ray labels in general is kind of what it's about, but with a focus on Vinegar Syndrome. It honestly left me with a lot of questions about how this stuff works and like how film preservation and restoration and all these things work. I almost want to reach out to like Oscar over at Vinegar Syndrome or somebody to see if I can get an interview to like answer all the maybe dumb questions I have about this, or just talk about this stuff more, you know? I just think it's so fascinating and it's hard to get good information about it. And I just kept having to pause and rewind and being like, that was really interesting. Let me make sure I understood that. Or like, I have like another question about that. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything, you know, that kind of thing. I really believe that this is worth the price of admission for this box set on its own. Like, I hope that they do a standard release of just this documentary because I think it's worth getting out there and people seeing. I wish it was longer, honestly. I just think it's so good. Since this is its own film, I did rate it and I gave it an 8 out of 10. Next is a little featurette called Deep Inside Vinegar Syndrome, which is fun. It's a fun look at like the offices at VS, and you get to meet a lot of the staff and people that I don't know, it's just kind of like a tour of their facilities and their offices, and it's a nice look at like the people who run all this stuff. Now for the rest of these features, I'm just going to kind of go in order of like what you're going to see as you pop the discs in, or like to kind of pair them with the films as they show up in the set. So first you get a commentary on Barbara by Elizabeth Purcell, who I'm a big fan of. She works at AGFA and does a lot of work in preserving and creating accessibility for like queer films and like gay porn, that kind of thing. This one's really good. There is a lot of information and context, especially about the novel that the film is based on, which apparently is like way, way, way less defensible and more like controversial and more almost gross in how it like sexualizes a young girl and like goes harder on the bestiality and all that other stuff. Yeah, that's what we're working with in terms of what we're adapting into a film, right? There is some amount of like padding in the commentary, and this is something that you're going to see across a lot of these commentaries, because kind of by design, I'm kind of surprised they went with commentaries instead of just video essays for all of this, because, you know, as a rule, almost, there's not a lot of information on most, if not all, of these films, and so filling a whole commentary with like really interesting information or whatever is challenging for sure. So she kind of goes into a lot of the history of the location of Fire Island and kind of the general state of sexploitation in the very late 60s and early 70s. It's a really good commentary that I recommend you watch. Next is a commentary on Las Vegas Strangler with Bill Ackerman and Amanda Reyes. They always fucking knock it out of the park and just pack their commentaries with wall-to-wall information. I don't know how they do it, where they pull up some of this stuff, or who they end up talking to get some of this information, but they really do go deep on this one. And yeah, I recommend that one as well. Next is a commentary for Voodoo Heartbeat with historian Charles Devlin. He gives a ton of background information on the actors and the locations and stuff like that. Next is a commentary for What's Love by historian Sam Sweet, moderated by Joe Rubin from Vinegar Syndrome. There's a ton of information about the director and the history of pornographic censorship in Los Angeles. He makes a really interesting point about how the director grew up Catholic, and so he dealt with a ton of guilt for being a pornographer, but he also kind of identified with the persecution of Christ and how poorly people in his profession were treated and thought of, like, especially at this time and in this city, like to be a purveyor of smut or director of pornography was considered to be like a very lowly profession. I don't know, people were really shunned for doing this work. And so he puts a lot of that kind of feeling of persecution and unfairness in this film. And I think that is really interesting. Last of the American Hoboes actually had the most amount of like proper features attached to it. First is a commentary with the historian Sean D. Langrick. It is exceptionally well researched and mainly serves as an autobiography of the director. So if you're interested in the director, that's certainly where you want to go. There's what they call a deleted nude scene for Hoboes. I'm not really sure why it was cut from the film. I guess deleted scenes get cut for various reasons, but it features some, let's say, conspicuously clean and attractive, fully nude women doing laundry in the creek. And so they're also like hanging out with the male hobos who are sufficiently like dirty and grimy and like regular looking and also wearing all of their clothes. Stuff like this where you watch it and you're like, huh, that's just how hobos are, right? The women are all like perfectly hygienic and clean and pretty and have makeup and just don't wear any clothes. It's just how it is over there, I guess. Next is a short film directed by Titus Mode, the director of Hoboes. It's called Outlaw Motorcycles. I don't know, this one, you kind of have to see it just for a few choice scenes in here. There's a scene where like various women are getting tattooed. Oh, it's a film about biker gangs. I should have led with that. And again, it purports to be a documentary, though I sort of doubt that. I will say at least the scenes that are staged here are far more interesting. There's a scene where like this dude is just like tattooing various women with like branding for the motorcycle gang in like a really crowded, like seedy basement with like, I don't know, 50 dudes watching or something. And the women just like take off all their clothes to get tattooed and they're just like drinking the whole time and like it is perhaps the most unseemly and unclean environment to get a tattoo you can possibly think of. It's fucking wild. And then there's also a scene where like the bikers are like officiating a biker wedding in like a parking lot, and one of the dudes has like a swastika armband and is like all dressed up like a Nazi, and he just starts kissing all the dudes at the wedding like on the mouth. It's insane. I think I gave this one a 6 or a 7, I don't remember, but it was certainly interesting. Also, both of these films had like intros and outros by the director. I think you can skip them, but they are there. Next is a commentary for Violated with Chris Poggiali. He discusses how he had a list of like lost films in his Temple of Schlock zine in the 80s that he has been keeping up with for decades and is well into the hundreds. And this one and Voodoo Heartbeat were 2 of the films on his list, so he was excited about that. Beware the Black Widow also has a commentary with historian Finley Freebert. This is just another one with a lot of like biographical information on the cast and the crew. And then finally, there was a commentary on Deep Inside with the historian Michael J. Bowden. I thought that this was better than the film anyway, honestly. I just think it's really great. There's a lot of like good typical biographical information, but also like he spends a lot of time analyzing the film as it's happening, which I really appreciated. Kind of analyzes the themes going on, as well as like the shot composition and the blocking throughout the film. So I really enjoyed that commentary, and I think it did make me appreciate the film more on a second viewing. Okay, so that's all the on-disc features. And now, before we take the Vinegar Syndrome 2023 reviews to a merciful close, let's go through the essays. We have another essay, or not another essay, but we have an essay from Sean Langrick, the guy who did the commentary for Hoboes. He does an essay on the director, and you know, if you wanted even more information on him, like this is a pretty good essay. And then he actually goes into a few bios of a lot of the actors that are in the film. Kind of, this definitely like confirmed all my suspicions that these were just actors. Next is an essay by Stephen Thrower, who I always love, about Voodoo Heartbeat, Sex Serum of Dr. Blake. It kind of goes through the history of the distribution of the film and the making of the film. This is where I got the information that there were like 3 cuts of the film: an X-rated cut, an R-rated cut, and a PG cut, which is insane to me. I don't know what is even left after you cut anything that wouldn't be PG. But yeah, he's just really stoked that this was found, because this was like one of his grails, and he's just so happy to finally see it. Next is an essay on What's Love by Charles Devlin. I like that the tagline on this film was very erotic, very artistic, but not a porno. I don't know, man. Especially in the last few scenes here, it's kind of just porn. Like, it still straddles that line between being hardcore and softcore, and it's not quite hardcore, but like, we're just watching a threesome for a while at a certain point, and like, that rules, and I'm in favor of it, but like, come on. There's artistic merit to it as well, but I think that there can be artistic merit to porn, so I don't know, that tagline is just funny to me. Oh, there's a really cool little, like, fun fact at the end of this, where they point out that in the film Irreversible by Gaspar Noé, when you're actually in their apartment and there's like film posters everywhere, and one of them is 2001: A Space Odyssey, there's actually a full framed one sheet of this film in their room. And as soon as he said that, I was like, shit, you're right. I remember seeing that poster in there. So that's really cool. The next is an essay by, again, Stephen Thrower, called A Remembrance of Films Lost. This was my favorite essay out of both of the books. It's just kind of generally explaining what lost films are, the different categories of lost films, and a few notable films that have been lost, or notable directors who have a lot of lost films. It's just written really passionately and really makes the case for why even like quote-unquote terrible films, or bad films, or films that seemingly have no reason to be there, or don't have any like cultural or artistic merit, should still be saved. There's a really good quote in here. It's towards the beginning. I really like this quote here. This is why it's so painful and tragic when a film is lost. It shouldn't happen, ever. No matter if they're silly, or boring, or inept, or cliched, every film is a world, and should therefore be protected from extinction. I recently watched Ray Dennis Steckler's Blood Shack, a film few people get excited about, and although I laughed at its meagerness, its slow poke repetition, its offhandedness, and its endless footage of the director's young daughters visiting a rodeo, I still came out the other end feeling like I had been somewhere. The Nevada desert, 1971, a tumble-down hut beyond the Vegas city limits, a black-clad loon named the Chopper. I think that's a really beautiful sentiment, and how, like, even if there's not much to the films, right? If they're not that good, like, you still feel like you've been somewhere. It's still like a time capsule and a, like, portal of sorts to another person's vision and to a time and a place that, by definition, no longer exists. So I really liked this essay. Next is an essay by Elizabeth Purcell called Queer History Lost and Found. This is a really good essay about how she kind of purchased a collection of films and discovered that a lot of them were like really notable lost hardcore films from the gay scene, and kind of goes through the history of this one theater in New York City that kind of started to specialize in gay hardcore films. Just another kind of manifesto for how important this stuff is, but generally also how film preservation is important, not because it just preserves cultural history in general, but because the voices and the output of marginalized people is more likely to be lost and more likely or less likely to be taken care of. And so this project that we're engaging with here is important in saving that particular cultural heritage. On to the next one. There's an essay from Nathaniel Thompson about Beware the Black Widow. It's a good essay about the history of the film and the people who made it. An essay by Tim Lucas on Deep Inside called The Beach House, Joe Sarno on the Threshold of Inga. This essay kind of just goes into the production history of Deep Inside and also places it in the context of Sarno's larger career and this period of his career in particular. Okay, this is an essay by Zach Carlson called Mr. Quack Quack and the Rare Blue Apes. This is probably my second favorite essay in here. It is like simultaneously like celebratory of this film while also like constantly shitting on it and making fun of it. And there's some really great anecdotes and quotes in here. Hold on, I need to find some of these quotes because they're really funny. Yeah, it's this one. I fucking laughed out loud when I read this. So he's telling the story about how he was working on this essay and was watching the film again. And a friend of his or a roommate or somebody came in and was like, "What are you watching?" And he says, like, I'm just going to read it because it's so good. Anyway, as I was scanning through the film one final time to make sure I had everything needed for my essay, my good friend popped by for an unexpected visit. "What are you watching?" I told him it was a totally unknown, unseen movie about a mute kid who befriends a blue chimp and a duck named Mr. Quack Quack. His eyes went huge and his mouth dropped open. Does it have an alligator who says, "Blame it on the Bobo"? Reality kneed us in the face and jumped up the chimney. Yes. Yes, it does. It turns out that the film had somehow been sold in a syndication package to a local Texas TV station, and Mike and his roommates had caught it one afternoon in college, then let slivers of it fester in their psyches for the next 30 years. This is the quote that I just will take with me to my grave. "The sudden unveiling of Hachi, Mr. Quack Quack, and the Swampies was simultaneously a satisfying and horrifying revelation for him, just as it will be for you, proving once again that there is no God, but he still hates us all. Enjoy." Next is an essay from Sam Deegan about Red Midnight, from political propaganda to exploitation cinema. This is excellent. It really is where I got most of the information that I relayed to you in my little review. She did a great job researching this and kind of placing it in context of like the larger Cold War propaganda scare films and things of that nature. Next is an essay on Violated, again by Chris Poggiali. I think I pronounced that differently than I did the first time. This is a really good essay about the history of this director and how he went from being like a fairly prestigious producer and filmmaker to just doing shit like this, and was like boxed out of the industry and kind of was bitter about that, but also just went harder into making like ridiculous, like schlocky films like this. Kind of cynically like provoking a lot of feminist movements and stuff like that to like make films as offensive and weird and out there as possible. The original name of this film was just The Rapist, and I think the distributor understandably was not feeling that one. Oh yeah, there's that. It's a good essay. And then Heather Drain has a essay on Barbara called Multi-Partner Mazurka, or How the Countercultural Became the Counterproductive Culture. Walter Burns' Barbara. She kind of talks about how this is a film about a certain group of people for whom the 1960s meant sex and drugs, but it didn't actually mean radical politics, and how those people kind of immediately sold out and became shitty Republicans. She also talks about how a lot of this stuff made her really uncomfortable, especially like the rape scenes and the dog scene. Which is all understandable. I will just not take any slander against the incredible soundtrack. And then, is this the last one? Yes. Finally, we have Strangling and Loathing in Las Vegas, looking back on the Las Vegas Stranglers' portrayal of Sin City by Amanda Reyes. This essay kind of mainly just talks about how she really appreciates this film because Las Vegas is a city in particular that is constantly changing. And so to get these sort of visual snapshots or these like celluloid records of the city at certain points in time and certain locations is kind of vital and unique. And especially how a lot of films set in Las Vegas show a very like flashy sort of touristy side of it, and very few films actually show what it's like to live there. And this is a film that she feels successfully does that. And so just another kind of case for appreciating these films as they are, even if they're not particularly great. Hopefully you got a good idea if this is the sort of thing that is going to be for you. Hopefully this convinces you to give this a shot, because I really do think that it's important, and I do think that it is worth your time and money, and it's a beautiful box set and a beautiful package and an excellent job from Vinegar Syndrome. Yeah, I hope I've made the case for why like films like this are important, even if they're not particularly great, which, to be clear, some of these films I did think were great. Some of them I just think were fine, and some of them weren't for me, but like that's okay. Like a lot of films that I watch are not for me or not particularly great, and like that doesn't mean that they shouldn't exist, right? Like I've seen plenty of other films from Vinegar Syndrome, from Shout Factory, from Kino, from Severin that I just thought were fine or didn't do it for me. But like they shouldn't not exist. They shouldn't not be accessible. And like I've seen stuff that's like 1,000 times more popular than these films that I thought was worse. And like I'm glad I had this experience going through all of this. Like it's, now that I've seen it, it's kind of inconceivable to think of a world where they don't exist, you know? So I hope that this kind of promotes discovery, that this kind of helps jumpstart the discovery of other lost films and taking chances on lost films, and in a kind of sense of putting them out on Blu-ray and everything like that. But yeah, that's the Lost Picture Show. As a release, it gets a 10 out of 10 from me. Yeah, I hope that you got something out of this. And with that, that's the end of Vinegar Syndrome November. That's the end of Vinegar Syndrome 2023. Onward to 2024. We fucking did it, you know? Cool. If you appreciated this, if you got something out of this, please hit the like button on this. I put so much fucking work into this, and like, it would be really cool to see this video do well. If you think that anybody you know would find this valuable, please send it to them. Leave me comments to read. Tell me what you thought of these films. Not a lot of people have seen them, so I would love to start a conversation about them. Subscribe to the channel if you want more discussions on cult and art house films. And if you want to support me monetarily, there are links in the description for my Patreon channel membership and Amazon wish list. There's also the address for my P.O. box. And you can follow my social media, Instagram, TikTok, Letterboxd, that kind of thing, if you'd like to be a little bit more intimate. And with that, I think that's all. Remember that Satan loves all of their children. Bye. I'd like to take a moment to thank our newest patron, Stephen Perkins. I'd also like to thank our accomplices, Anthony Listro, The Boogeyman's Closet, Carlin Cook, Deanna Vave, The Disconnected, Dustin Putman, George String, Julie Humphreys, Nosferatu 1334, Pippa Crab, and Sasha Bobashosaurus. If you'd like to be counted amongst their ranks, the link is in the description.